right, everybody talking about that the way you walk and do you wanna do your mind? Hey, you walk right in, head right down, and then let your mind roll on.
Hi everybody, this is Catlike Reflexes, episode 2. The first was hosted by Brian Pitts. This is Brendan Main speaking. He's given me the opportunity to host something, and I jumped at the chance. With me this afternoon are Brian Pitts and Derek Howard.
Good morning, Internet.
Hi, everybody.
And we got talking about art and entertainment and media and experiences, and we talked about recommendations, and a recommendation is a very interesting thing. It's one thing to say something is good or bad, which you're making an objective claim there, and it's safer to say something like, I like this, I didn't like this. But ultimately, when you're giving a review to somebody, often people will conclude by saying something to the lines of, you should check it out, this is good, you can borrow my copy, this is where you can find it. The conclusion to the argument isn't, this is an objective good as it exists in the world, or this was my positive experience of it, but turning to something practical, the practical question of, we have a finite amount of time and we want to make sure that the stuff that we're entertaining ourselves is good stuff, and we want people to help us out. Recommendations are often valuable, but the notion behind the recommendation is, this is good, so you should go and find it. The onus is on the person receiving the advice to go and do that. So it's interesting, when I'm gifted a book or gifted a video game, the suggestion is explicit, right? You should read this, you should play this. And I always feel a lot of guilt until I get around doing it. I know the books on my shelf that are gifts, and I feel a little tinge of shame every time I see them and I haven't cracked them open yet. I think, Brian, you have a copy of Preacher that I gave you 10 years ago.
Wow.
That you haven't gotten.
I don't know if it was 10 years ago, but
Okay, so
but I haven't read it. That's true.
Your position is that
It was long before my child was born, and she's 3. So.
Okay, but you're suggesting that you've had my copy of Preacher for somewhere in the single digits of years, then?
Yes, in years. Yes,
the single digits, somewhere in the upper single digits of years.
I also have a lot of gifted DVDs that still have the shrink wrap on them.
Yeah.
From various people, and
like
you say, these are just recommendations that people give you, and you got to be in the mood.
Or when someone says to you, you know what's really good? House. And you say, I have one, I live in it, and they say, no, all, whatever, 8 seasons of Hugh Laurie limping around and telling people they have cancer.
Right.
I've never seen House. I assume that's what House is like, is just Hugh Laurie? Is that his name?
Yeah.
It was that or Grant. I got it right. The right Hugh.
That's true. The recommendation I always hate is, it doesn't matter what the show is. They'll say, oh my god, you have to watch such and such show.
Colossal amount of TV.
There's like, oh my god, there's 7 seasons of it, and 6 of them are on Netflix. So you gotta watch them. It's like, I don't have 8 months to watch a television program.
For all you know, you might not have 2 weeks.
Or they'll say like, and I've done this before too. They'll say like, oh, it's such a good show. The first couple seasons are like, meh, whatever. But like the 3rd season, it's like, you want me to watch 2 seasons.
I'm pretty sure at this point this is just a gypsy curse.
Yeah.
That you're giving to me is this 2 seasons of mediocre TV.
Exactly.
But getting back to this idea about recommendations, I wondered here. We're speaking to the internet, so ostensibly, I think
Hi, internet.
I think all 4 billion of its users are listening right now. I think that it's fair to say
Every single one.
Every single one. Everyone who's on the internet.
The nice thing about the internet is, 4 billion people might not be listening, but 4 billion people could be listening.
Yeah, they're getting to it.
Yeah.
It's a recommendation.
Here's an exercise for you. Since all of you are listening simultaneously, I'm going to count to 5, and on 5 I want all of you to clap. If everyone listening to this claps at the exact same time, we could cause a typhoon. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ah! Oh, look at the sky. It's darkening.
And that's...
Right, I digress. Hello.
And that's the plot of The Day After Tomorrow.
I recommend.
The sequel to it. But I think that there's a real value in recommendations on some level, because whenever I find something by myself accidentally that's amazing, I always get this tinge of resentment. I talked about this before, this tinge of resentment, and I think, why didn't anyone tell me about this? And conversely, whenever I enjoy something that has been deeply recommended to me, I can't run around and tell people because the world knows.
Right.
It's not, I haven't figured something out. So this is a process that people sort of engage in, is telling each other about good art. So my question then to you guys would be, recommendations. What are your ultimate recommendations? Let's say if I was to say, what would a movie be? I mean, I know that this is difficult. I know that this is one size fits all. You would make different recommendations based off of different people's
Sure.
preferences. But what would be, let's say, one movie that you would recommend everybody see? If you could make a curriculum, not just a high school curriculum, but a life curriculum, and say this is a movie that everybody gets to watch.
Just one movie?
Yeah, it's like how Bono got to download the U2 album into everybody's iPod.
Right.
You could do this to people's brains.
And I could be
as
terrible as Bono.
You could be as good and terrible in his wrath as Bono in his creation and destruction Avatar forms. Yes.
Oddly, CBC just gave that album of the year, but said that it was also the single most hated album, so no one listens to it.
I didn't listen to it either. I just got rid of it.
They just hated it by spite.
Movie, huh?
Yeah, movie.
I don't want to cheat because you said one movie, but my instinct is to say that everybody should watch all or any of the 007 films.
Okay.
You both know that I, and many of you listening, because let's face it, it's only our friends and family, know that I am a huge 007 fan, and those movies were very important for me growing up and into my adulthood. And if you watch them, you from beginning to end, you will experience the evolution of a certain type of cinema that is action cinema, and it's very interesting. There's a lot of fun stuff going on, but that's not my real answer because I don't want to cheat. I have to pick just one. So, Derek, do you have any ideas yet?
Well, since we're just saying what our favorite
is this like when you go to a restaurant and you don't know what you want? You go, you guys order first, and then you have that amount of time.
This is exactly it.
I think that there are a lot of ways to think about this question, and one answer might be, I love this movie so much that I will voice it on people. Another might be, I think this is something that everybody should experience. Mm-hmm. So you can choose something terrible just to make the world a slightly worse place.
I think that if we're going by fan favorites, I have to announce that any of the kung fu cinema from the 70s is definitely movies that I would recommend. 36th Chamber of Shaolin, Drunken Master 2, etc., etc. But as far as a movie that I force upon people, I recommend wholeheartedly without... you can't look at it. I can't spoil this for you. You just have to sit down and hit play. Oh, there are so many good films. And with that, the problem comes with this era of spoilers, where the trailer reveals all, and the internet, people go on the internet and say, there was a raccoon and a talking tree. And you're like, oh, well, now that's kind of spoiled.
You
There's
totally
no
ruined the rescuers.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I had a thrill one time. It was actually in giving a recommendation. It was to our mutual friend Surf, and this was, I don't know, a few years ago. I found a movie I knew he would love, and it was kind of a little not as well known a film. I'm pretty sure he'd never heard of it. So I phoned him up, and I said, "Listen, I'm coming over." This was back when I was neighbors with him. I said, "Look, I'm coming over right now. I got a movie on a thumb drive. I'm not going to tell you what it's called. I'm not going to tell you what it's about or who's in it or anything. I'm just going to come over. I'm not even going to tell you the title. We're going to put it on, and you're going to watch it because I know you're going to love it, and I don't want to tell you anything." And he agreed, and I went over, and indeed he had not heard of it before. So this was the complete, from scratch viewing. He didn't know anything about it, and that film was Black Dynamite.
Okay.
Wonderful.
And I knew he would love it, and I put it in, and it sort of starts a bit slow, and he doesn't even know the title, and he's kind of, I can tell he's kind of looking at me like, okay, as it starts going on, and then when it sort of hits its stride, sort of in the theme song, it's clearly a parody of blaxploitation films, he just was like, all right, I'm in, and he had such a good time, and I felt so good.
Vindicated?
I don't know about vindicated in that he didn't tell me he would hate it, and I was vindicated when he liked it, but more like I really did make a good recommendation.
Yeah, you did him a
And there's a
service
pride
with
in that when someone. It kind of sucks when you give someone a recommendation and then they watch it and you go, and you want them to like it because you recommended it and you say and you can kind of come on a little strong and kind of say like, so what did you think?
Yeah.
And then if they don't say that it blew their mind, you're kind of disappointed, and that happens to me sometimes.
I've heard you make the same point about Portal. Is that
Oops!
you kind of have to.
I kicked it. Did that?
There's nothing now. It's just black.
Oh, good.
Should be good.
And we're back. All right, that was the quick interlude. But
I don't think we went anywhere. The screen went to sleep at the same time I accidentally kicked the microphone.
With the same rate of our audiences.
Yeah.
So all right, well, welcome back.
Yes, the video game Portal is one of those games that comes out of nowhere, people love, and people really wanted to recommend. I don't know. Would you agree with me, Derek? It was probably, at least at the time, the most recommended video game of all time.
Ooh, no.
Because when people see it, they just kind of go, "Oh my god, you gotta play this! You got." It's certainly up there. I think you'll agree. And people would no most recommended.
You are asking a video game question to me, and this is so.
Well, what do you think is the most recommended video game?
The problem I face with Portal is that as awesome and jaw-droppingly fun as that game is, it was merely intended to be just a demo
Exactly.
and a very limited audience that just happened to get worldwide attention, spawn a sequel, the internet, everything. The problem is that not everyone can play Portal. They sincerely can't. There are a lot of people who have problems with the first-person shooter mechanic where they can't actively run around and look simultaneously, let alone handle any of the other 4 or 5 buttons involved. When you're looking for worldwide appeal, and I'm recommending video games to everyone, it is essentially Mario Brothers, which is the most fun 2-button game that you can play. I mean, it's just shy of Atari's 1-button E.T. game. Well,
but I think what I'm saying is that Portal was the kind of game that, for many people, because it came out of nowhere, they weren't expecting it, when they played it, many people felt the need to tell other people about it.
But I can't go to that. I can't go to that because it's not a game that everyone can play. Now, with
that might be true.
No, what I'm saying here is Portal is a wonderful game to recommend someone watch someone play.
Okay,
you have got to see this game. But I know you can't play it, and I know you suffer from dizzy spells, so I'm going to walk very slowly, and I'm not going to try and aggravate your motion sickness. But you have got to see this game. At worst, you have to close your eyes and listen to the dialogue, and it's funny, and the music is great, and the portals and the puzzles, and it's wonderful. But I know you can't play it. Now, the problem with recommendations of that nature is that it's a video game. It's an interactive medium. So if you're actually asking, what is a game that you would recommend, I have 2.
Okay.
What
are your recommendations?
I hate to say that they are both first-person shooter in dynamic as well. And for the PlayStation 3. The first is Journey. Journey is... I recommend it so highly because it is a 1-button game that uses effectively, you tilt the controller, so you don't really need to look. You can just tilt the controller left or right and see left or right. You only need to move with your thumbstick, and the single button in there is jump. That's great. That's wonderful. That's a 1-button game that's just absolutely gorgeous. Takes you through the 7 stages of grief. It's wonderful. The other game is very much a first-person shooter that is very well... It's in high acclaim and low popularity. It is Spec Ops: The Line.
Right.
What an absolute heart-wrenching, gut, just churning. Oh, it is. It is so bad in the sense that the themes are horrific. The execution is very sloppy intentionally, which turned a lot of hardcore war first-person gamer COD. Advanced Warfare type of players off because they wanted the tight mechanics. You know, if you throw a grenade, it has to land here. If you shoot a bullet, it has to go there. And it was intentionally sloppy because of the structure of the dynamic itself. Spec Ops: The Line is an absolute masterpiece. And It's very, very, very low in regard for a lot of people. And for that alone, not a lot of people have played it. And for that alone, I recommend it to any and everyone that I come across. Spec Ops: The Line.
Funny thing is, since we're talking about recommendations, you told me that quite some time ago. You recommended that game, and I guess maybe about a year ago, I found it at a hawk shop, and I thought, oh wow, that's that game that Derek recommended. I'm going to pick it up, and it wasn't even very expensive. And I brought it home, and I haven't even opened it because, and it's not because I don't want to play it, but it came from a recommendation, but I still don't. It's hard to pull that trigger. I think it's without the recommendations.
I think in the game you'll find that it's a game that's about how difficult it is to pull triggers. But
slow clap.
Yeah,
Slow
very
clap.
good, very good.
We'll speed that clap up in post. Well, it sounds like you're actually going to get applauded. No, but I think I premise this by mentioning the shame and not following through on recommendations. But I think it's fine to have lists. It's fine to have aspirations. I mean, we get there. Derek, your two game picks, you mentioned there are always going to be people that are going to be excluded from these things mechanically. And so I personally, the only first-person shooters generally that I play are the ones recommended to be that have some twist, that have something to say, that have some keen writing. Or are an ambient experience. So
Unfinished Swan?
I'm afraid I hadn't given that a go.
Very non-violent first-person shooter, but I digress.
I don't know. I mean, I see the swan. I'm going to try and shoot it, finished or not. This is my experience playing Duck Hunt. No, but Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite.
Oh, very good.
Or even games like The Last of Us are not mechanically my cup of tea, but I know that there's something there experientially for me. And the way that we find our way into these things are from reviews and people saying this isn't... Before I played Spec Ops: The Line, I thought, well, it was great.
That's for you.
Sounds good.
Let's take a break.
All right, and we will be back in 5. And it continues. All right.
Is it continuing?
Yeah, I think so. Not
Yeah,
just
it seems to be
continuing
good.
on.
You want to give
Alright.
it a 3 steamboat? You don't have to, but
That's all right.
Funny.
Idiot-proof, folks. This stuff is idiot-proof.
So where were we?
Yeah, welcome back, folks. So this is episode 2 of Catlike Reflexes, and we're talking about recommendations. So, Derek, so Brian made a recommendation of, began by talking about, you recommended everybody watch a Bond movie, but they qualified that. I mean, I don't think that someone could say, oh, a Bond movie, of course, I watched Casino Royale, and that counts.
Right.
I mean, when you say Bond movie, are you talking about a vintage of Bond movie?
Yeah. I mean, when nowadays the Bond films they've sort of been rebooted. They're a little more modern. But when people say Bond film, I think they're really referring to a different era. Connery sort of Moore era. Which is sort of where all those tropes come from.
Right. So the original Bond movie stuff.
Right.
Derek, you mentioned some kung fu movies at first, and one of the ones that you mentioned is Jackie Chan's Legend of the Drunken Master, Drunken Master 2. I think if I was to recommend a single kung fu movie to people, I probably would recommend a Jackie Chan movie over a Bruce Lee movie, over something like Enter the Dragon, Chinese Connection. I mix up the names, but rather, I think that a Jackie Chan movie is more universal, and Drunken Master 2 is hilarious.
There's an element within the martial arts community of skill and seriousness versus skill and humor. Bruce Lee falling into the skill and serious subset. He mastered that domain. Jackie Chan absolutely went counterculture and counterintuitive and did the comedy aspect, but it was also reflected in the 36 Chambers of Shaolin.
No, I don't know that. Who's the lead in 36 Chambers? Is it also a Chan movie?
No, it is a Shaw Brothers, and it is one of the finest pieces of martial arts cinema you'll ever see, technical and otherwise. I grew up watching in Canada in 1988. I'm gonna hypothesize. In CKNX Wingham? Wyerden? I can't honestly remember. There was an MST3K clone called Really Bad Movies that was held every Sunday night at midnight. I've been trying to find out more about this on the internet, and I can't. I know it's out there. And effectively, being an MST3K clone, this guy had access to all of these old pieces of cinema, and he would put an overlay circular in the top corner of himself just ripping into these films. And one of them was the not the 36 Chambers of Shaolin, but the 37th, which was the sequel, I believe. Not certain of that.
Yeah, scientists has proven now that Shaolin does have 37 chambers rather than
Indeed.
the 36 as postulated.
And it was the bar none, not only for the film being one of the funniest ones I'd seen, but also this guy ripping into it. If I could, I would love to recommend not just a film, but the MST3K overlay of many of the films. In fact, the MST3K series alone, those films were horrible, but man, was it really, really fun to watch them rip into it, and that itself becomes a film. Yeah.
Oh, so essential viewing is MST3K making fun of bad movies.
Yeah.
There is something about them that has given them a second life, and given them sort of a presence in pop culture. If we're talking about kung fu movies, I think that it's difficult to recommend some kung fu movies in their entirety, but the one that I would recommend is Jackie Chan's Who Am I?
Wow.
Begins with him as a special ops agent getting amnesia, and then he has to sort of figure it back up. It's a classic Jackie Chan movie, so there's a race in it, there's some slapstick stuff, there's some spy stuff, and it's all very forgettable, but there's some amazing stunts in it. And the final fight on a rooftop is, I've seen so many times that the choreography is just, I can see the whole thing play out. It's Jackie Chan against two thugs, a really tall European guy and a small athletic Asian guy. The European guy fights with his feet. He's a kickboxer. And they actually got a classic kickboxer to do it. And the little guy, the Asian guy, has these lightning fast punches. And so he has to go up against this. First, he has to go up against this the one guy with his punching, the one guy with his kicking, and then fight them in tandem. And he has to find ways of evading both powerful punches and kicks. It reminded me of a video game that I used to love. A game called Karateka.
Oh, I love that game.
Yeah.
And that physical logic of moving back and forth and occupying the spaces and kicking and so on. And so it's funny, but it's beautifully choreographed. And to this day, there's not a fight scene that brings me more joy. And so, if anybody's interested in kung fu movies, I'm certain you can find on the internet the final act, or even the final couple scenes of Who Am I? If you like Jackie Chan movies, watch it in its entirety. But that scene alone, with the two guys kicking and punching, stands alone in my brain. The difficult thing, I think, when we're talking about recommendations, is that we're all talking about these things that we found affinities to. We caught on TV, or we saw it in our youth, or it affected us very deeply. And everybody gets these, right? And in some ways, the stuff that we find our way to personally are the ones that I think have the most intimate reaction to us. So there's always going to be something of the giver. When somebody gives a recommendation, there's something of them in it. Or it's a comment, or in some cases you could take it and say, why did they think I would like this? Who do they think I am that they would recommend me this?
Right.
So we have a couple movies and we have a couple games. I think it's easier to recommend movies because you just press play and you go through them. You might not have a sense of the heritage. You might not have a developed aesthetic sense to be able to fully fathom its importance.
But it's the same for everyone who watches it.
In the same way that, I mean, when we talk about generating canons, we have this idea that we just need to get Romeo and Juliet in the brain of every high schooler.
Right.
We just need to cram it in there. And we'll talk about the importance of, the shape of tragedy, and we'll talk about iambic pentameter, and we'll talk about all these things. But they just need to have that so they can get that subset of Simpsons jokes, or what have you, right? Or I was going to say To Kill a Mockingbird, I think is still incredibly seminally read, or something like what was once countercultural but is now fairly mainstream. Catcher in the Rye. These are types of things that we just, at some point, culturally, we decided that everybody should have their brain and know. So I think that ultimately when I'm talking about recommendations, I'm talking about the sort of creation of canons here. But this is, but if you think about it as canon, as canonical, then you start thinking about it differently. I think that it's good that we're talking about our likes and forcing them on the anonymous internet.
I had someone do that to me because in 2012 I went to the Sudbury Film Festival, Cinefest, and saw The Hunt with Mad Mikkelsen, who played Le Chiffre in the modern
in Casino Royale.
Yes,
movie.
that's right.
Fantastic actor, and The Hunt, one of the most it squeezes your heart and does not let go. I was crying by the end of this film, very heart-wrenching. I'm not going to get into it. All right, very, very briefly, The Hunt is and I recommend this to everyone, it's about a loving school teacher who has a class full of, I think, kindergartens, grade ones. He's part of the community. Everyone loves him. He loves everybody. Very, very nice guy. And for whatever reason, due to circumstances, a small child, effectively not knowing, says, he touched me in the wrong place. And even though it was a very mistaken thing by an innocent child who was maybe playing a prank or what have you, the speed, dexterity, and ferocity of which the community turns against him and does not let go is just absolutely heart-wrenching. The film itself, I saw him in Casino Royale, and he was amazing, but in this, he shone. So I mentioned this on the internet. Oh, yeah, I saw this film, The Hunt, it was wonderful. And someone from, I think Denmark, I'm not certain about this, recommended to me, if you like that guy, he's got some great films. He's got an extensive backlog. You have to watch a movie called Flickering Lights. You have to watch this. And so I acquired the movie, and it sat on my shelf, along with all of the other, I have to watch this at some point. Well, just over this past Christmas, I was like, oh, Flickering Lights. I have no idea why I have this in my catalog, but hit play. And it starts off very slow, about 4 childhood buddies, and they go into a life of crime together. And it is just slow. I'm not against slow films. I like Police Adjective, wonderful films. But this just goes slow, and then slower, and then slower, and it becomes a heartpathy of the week Hallmark movie, and I hated it. I was like, why would this guy have recommended this to me? This is the worst piece of...
It was an elaborate prank.
Yeah. He played the long con because he knew I wouldn't watch it for 2 or 3 years, and I didn't. And
The long yawn.
That's a recommendation based off of, oh, you like this actor? Well, you're going to like these films from this actor.
It's funny because that same actor, Mads Mikkelsen,
Thank you.
was also in... I saw him in another film at Cinefest, as a matter of fact, called Coco Chanel and Igor Stravinsky, based on...
Yeah, he played Chanel. It was good.
Well, he does play Igor Stravinsky, and I was like, wow, it sounds like a really cool, exciting premise. There was a rumor that at the time, what is true is that Coco Chanel and let Igor Stravinsky and his family stay at her house when he was writing his music because she was a fan and he wasn't making any money. And there was a huge rumor that they were having a love affair. It was never substantiated, but that was the rumor. And this movie posits that is true, and here's how it went down. And so it's 2 very attractive people having lots of sex, and it's the most boring movie I'd ever seen. And I was so disappointed. So maybe he just chooses boring movies.
So we have 2 fairly recent movies about Coco Chanel. We have Coco Before Chanel.
That's right.
And we have Coco Chanel and
Igor Stravinsky.
When are we going to get Coco Chanel was an actual Nazi, the movie? Like, not her as a kid, not maybe she was having an affair, like she was just a Nazi collaborator in Vichy France. Like, is this not a thing? Do we not get this?
Yeah, I think this movie was not set at that time, but it was...
Yeah, so people don't want... Yeah, so people want the Coco Chanel before it gets to the Inglorious Bastard phase of Coco Chanel's life.
Apparently, secretly, Julia Child was an Allied spy during the war.
See, I want to see Coco Chanel versus
Julia Child. Wouldn't that be
a
great...
See that.
I'm sure it never happened, but what the hell? We can Tarantino that and just make like an alternate history.
Play them both.
Yeah.
It does sound like
can
an
do a silly voice for-
SCTV skit.
Yeah, that's right.
Blah.
So we have some. So we've shaken out some movies, and we've shaken out some of the problems with making video game recommendations. So far, we've gotten to a couple first-person shooters, or if you haven't got to it, if you want a really good platformer game, check out that Mario. In case you've never heard of them.
Also, I didn't recommend any video games, but I would recommend 2 games. One is an old game from the Commodore 64 that I played all the time called Trolls and Tribulations.
Oh,
Okay.
I vaguely recall this.
It was a platformer. It had it was sort of a puzzle platformer. You had to figure out where to go, and there were spiders. You were kind of in a dungeon kind of thing. And the music was, that old 8-bit music
yeah.
of...
the chiptune style music.
It was 8-bit versions of classical music.
Okay.
And it was amazing. And as a kid, I didn't know that those were classical music. I thought that was just the music from the game, and it was awesome.
So
and then when I grew up and I heard
you go to
these...
an opera, and then you say, why are they playing the
I'm
Trolls
like, why are they playing Trolls and
Tribulations
Tribulations?
theme?
Anyway, for the music alone, it's worth it, but it's a really fun game. And the other game in more modern times that is probably a lot more accessible is Red Dead Redemption.
Oh, yes.
Which is probably one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had playing a video game. And if you don't know about it, then you weren't paying attention, because it was a big game a few years ago, Game of the Year. It's a Western. It's kind of like Grand Theft Auto, but set in a Western environment. And
instead of the cars, the thing you steal is the innocence of America.
That's right. That's right. You can find a young virgin America and just shoot it in the face.
Yeah, you actually get 10. You get 10 gamer points for doing that. There's an achievement.
Actually, there is
Yeah,
an achievement for tying a woman to a railroad track and watching her get hit by a train.
Spoiling American Beauty.
Yeah.
The West was 1. If you actually win it, that's 5 points.
Actually, there is. Yeah, that's true. There,
No.
there is an actual achievement for killing all the buffalo.
Yeah, there is. You actually get to know.
but that aside, it's actually a really good story.
Until you get to that point, you didn't know it was James Marston who was the one. Who did it?
Yeah, that's
It was just him grinding up his skill.
When all the cougars are killing you, what is that representative of?
It's representative of
Republicans.
a ridiculously powerful cougar AI. Like, I don't know why a cougar is stronger than a bear. I don't know why.
Out of nowhere.
I don't know why. And they look the same as the ground, so
Yeah.
they just. It's as if
I'm on a horse. I'm off the horse. I'm dead.
I'm terrified.
Although I don't know. When I see a bear in that game, it's not just the bear that shits in the woods.
No. The bears in Skyrim are
yeah?
the most... I saw a bear take on an elder dragon, and it was the most fun thing I've ever watched in my life. This bear holding its own. And then it started coming after me, and I didn't even bother
Well, a
running.
level 1 character in Skyrim can kill a dragon. Why can't a bear? I mean, it makes sense to me.
Oh, the bear was just going to take
If I was to
anyway.
games are hard.
Yes.
Recommendations for games are hard. One game that I would recommend, but it's incredibly difficult to recommend, is one of I want to say it's a point-and-click adventure game. It's not, but it is an adventure game. It's a puzzle game called Grim Fandango. It was made. Tim Schafer had a hand in that, and that laid the lifespan of LucasArts. Grim Fandango is this wonderful game. I think it has whip-smart writing, and I'm always going to love a game that has wonderful writing. But it's incredibly difficult to get to play. There are no digital copies of this game, and you need to really download some stuff to get the discs to even run on modern OSs. I have heard that they're working on a new version of the game. If they do, I think I'd like to see them modernize. You see, in that version of the game, you actually had a character, Manny Calavera, this skeleton who lives in the land of the dead, and it's his job to reap souls, but he's bad at his job. He's kind of like a bad vacation salesman. And you sort of move around with these tank-like controls, so you have him sort of shuffling about and moving around. And I think that a modern way to do it would just have it be a point-and-click adventure game where anything that you can interact with, you can just notice with your mouse and will walk over there. It's this beautiful, wonderfully voice-acted, wonderfully scripted, hilariously funny games, and there aren't enough funny games. Games that are actually beautifully funny. So I don't think. So I think that was mostly academic to say Grim Fandango. It'll find its way back to you. One game that anyone can play and anyone can enjoy and anyone can probably get their hands on, if they have an Xbox or a PS3, is Katamari Damacy.
Oh yes.
I've never known.
PlayStation 2, PlayStation Portable.
Yeah. So the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PSP, and Xbox 360 have, and they're of a type. You'll have that in your head for now. The rest.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I've never heard someone say I can't play Katamari. That's not quite true, because some of the levels, and especially some of the earlier versions of the game, the first one has a couple punishing levels, and sort of the midway through where you need to really make your ball larger and larger and larger within a small span of time, and if not, then you get yelled at. It's no fun for anybody.
And I do know some people who succumb to motion sickness while playing it.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So the same people who can't enjoy Portal can't enjoy.
Yeah, that's right.
And also, color blindness is a huge issue in a lot of games.
I never thought of that, but you're right.
Absolutely. What is the one game I'm thinking of that's very, very, very recent that people have been... I'm balking on this, but some of the massive AAA games just don't take into account the fact that people are colorblind. And so for any of the puzzles where you have to match red with blue, no, not happening.
It's what, Dead Redemption?
Yeah, they don't know. They think it's green Dead Redemption.
No, can't tell.
You fool!
And I apologize to all the colorblind people listening right now, because clearly I don't understand how colorblind is.
I would love to do a podcast on peripherals, because for people with disabled hands, they've had to jury rig
No, and that's fascinating stuff. Gaming and disability, I think, is a huge topic. But I think that I do think that advances are being made. It used to be that you couldn't really get subtitles. Nowadays, if the game is pretty talky, you can get subtitles. And not only that, but I've seen BioWare especially has been good for this. I'll have to do my homework, because perhaps I hallucinated this, but I think that rather than just subtitles, you could actually have the game sort of done up as closed caption. So the noises are also
that's correct. That's correct.
Citation needed. I may have just made that up, but Bioshock may or may not be good for that.
Invader Zim had closed captions in the Irken language, which was really funny to watch. I thought Braille would be an amusing one.
Now, speaking of Invader Zim, you had recommended Invader Zim to everybody at one time.
I love it.
And you lent me, I think, a copy, I believe.
Right.
And I actually watched it.
Hey!
Which I only mention because I usually don't take people's recommendations. And I did watch it, and I did enjoy it, so thank you.
You're welcome. It is one of the most, again, underrated, fantastic, classic pieces of cartoon in the modern era.
Now, you're in other media types, like books or music?
I mean, music is a good one. But I think that before we move on to music, I think that let's talk about books for just a moment. Is there a book that you would foist upon the world?
Yes.
What is your book,
The
sir?
Bible! No, I wouldn't really do that. I just want to see it.
It is the greatest story ever told.
It's the best-selling book of all time.
It's amazing.
I'm waiting for the sequel.
When you see
there is. It's you know what? It has a stupid title. It's a New Testament.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not talking about the Bible. My actual book recommendation is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Nice.
Excellent.
Just the individual or the entire quadrilogy?
Well, if you can read the whole thing if you want, but if I only had to pick one, obviously the first one is the one. Right. It is the best of them all, I think. And the reason I pick it is I read it when I was young, sort of high school age, as many people do. It tends to be popular with younger people. First of all, it's really funny. It's good sci-fi in that it uses science fiction ideas to further sort of modern day satire. It's a lot of fun, and every time I read it, I've read it, several times now, I usually get something a little bit different out of it, something else that I noticed or something, because it's really packed in. Like, the language is really precise and dense, but in a good way. Just there's a lot going on, but it doesn't seem like it. It's an easy read. You don't have to feel like you're doing homework when you read it. And especially if you're a younger person and maybe reading's not your thing, check it out. It's a lot of fun, and you won't be able to put it down for like 20 years.
Oddly,
so that's my recommendation.
Oddly, I put it down about 3 years later, I was like, oh, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not your thing?
I enjoyed it. I really, really liked the Hitchhiker's Guide. I read 3 of the 5,
Right.
and then someone recommended to me, you got to check out this one called Dirk Gently, and I was like, no.
I think that Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, for one thing, it's very easy to be a completionist with Douglas Adams. Just read everything, which is it's just read Hitchhiker, then read Dirk Gently, then read a sort of little side stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's the same immediate appeal. I think that I had to take a couple runs at the first Dirk Gently book because he's trying to get something existential out of noir, and you get there. You can get there, but it isn't. I mean, it doesn't grab you at page 1. It doesn't. You need to invest something in it, I think. So I think when you mentioned it wasn't for you, I mean, I think that there are thousands of people for whom they had the same experience. The Hitchhikers did something for them that Dirk Gently didn't.
The problem with recommendations of really good books is when you're recommending something that is groundbreaking, it has a chance of either being an unknown find or a foundation for others. So in the sense of Die Hard, you could say, you have to watch this movie. It's about a guy fighting a lot of bad guys and shooting them dead. After Die Hard came out, there was a whole slew of films, and when you go back and you watch the original Die Hard, you may have those subsequent films in your mindset.
And you say, this isn't original at all, but really it is.
Yeah, and so...
I do think that there is a surprise to watching Die Hard. The surprise is that Die Hard is actually good.
It was based off a novel by... I'm fudging on this one here, but it was actually based off a novel, and over the Christmas holiday, being the annual tradition of Die Hard itself, we looked... my friend and I looked into what the original novel was. The prequel to Die Hard, the novel form, is a film called The Detective, which was made into a Frank Sinatra film in 1968.
Well, that's interesting.
And so, recently I watched the Frank Sinatra film, The Detective, starring a guy who could be John McClane, but isn't, involved in a New York detective setting, which you can see the very, very loose thread of similarity, and it really, the two films don't match up.
I love tracing the genealogy of films like that, and adaptations like that. I went to a Black and White Film Fest with Colleen, my wife, recently, and we watched a couple of noir movies, Chandler movies, that were not...
Spade.
Sam
Spade?
No, they weren't Humphrey Bogart.
Oh.
Humphrey Bogart didn't play... indeed...
Philip Marlowe?
Marlowe, yeah, that's right. And Wikipedia is going to tell me what they were. Rather, there was one, but even watch when you think of a Seminole and realize that it has a history, it has and people have been making more of these things, but some of them don't make their way into the canon. Recently, Brian, this Christmas, you and I watched The Shop Around the Corner.
That's right.
The Jimmy Stewart movie set in Budapest. That
yes, you can't see me nodding, so yes, I'm saying yes.
That more recent was a treatment of a play that more recently was done up as You've Got Mail, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh no, is that right? Yeah,
that's right.
Got, okay.
That's correct.
And so I mean,
with
Meg Ryan and
Tom Hanks.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And so it was interesting to sort of watch that and have a sense of that history and have a sense of that.
It's kind of like, I feel it's like going in a time machine a little bit. Saying, I recognize where this is going, but the people who are doing it right now don't. And it's kind of exciting to watch. Like when going back to 007, there's the Casino Royale that was done in the 50s that was an episode of the Climax television series where Jimmy Bond, an American spy, takes on Le Chiffre, played by Peter Lorre. And it doesn't have anything...
Peter Lorre plays Le Chiffre?
Yeah, it's great.
Oh my gosh!
It's amazing. And
I have to watch this.
It's it's obviously very condensed because it's only it's not a full length movie, And it doesn't have any of the James Bond stuff that you think of because they didn't have that yet. I mean, there were the novels, but the movies hadn't really popularized it yet. So they really just were like, well, we kind of got this novel, let's adapt it into a show. And they didn't really know what they had because that wasn't the thing yet.
It hadn't happened yet. And so much of what we consider as iconic or seminal hadn't sort of occurred yet.
Yeah.
For those listening, the Philip Marlowe film adaptation that I mentioned that did not have Humphrey Bogart playing Marlowe was Murder My Sweet. That was 1944. It had Dick Powell playing Marlowe. And it's kind of a chummier, hammier one. And I'm seeing the film adaptations, and I'm seeing that a host of people have done it. But to me, I think that Humphrey Bogart is seminal.
Didn't
Yeah, I
Dick
think so.
Powell do the radio variation of Philip Marlowe, or am I thinking Gerald?
I'm gonna ask Siri that. We're gonna figure it
That's
out.
good.
Regardless,
Okay.
so I mean, so these things have histories, and you can say, and so some of these things you can say, well, if you like that, perhaps you'll like this.
Right.
When you mentioned Die Hard for a second, I have to say that Die Hard comes heavily recommended to me, but until I watched it, I didn't understand what was being recommended, which is that it's not just an amazing action film, it's just an amazing movie.
Yeah.
And I'll go one step further on that to say you have to get the Blu-ray, which showcases in full glory the widescreen effect. Apparently they had access when they were making this film. It was just a very low-budget film. It was. However, they had access to a lot of extensively expensive high-tech cameras at their disposal, and so they filmed it in the most super high-res resolution that they could, and actually downsized it for the theaters, but they brought it back to life in the Blu-ray. The scenery actually makes sense. The scenery, which you saw in the theater in the 80s, actually now plays a role and is pivotal in things that we haven't seen since the Pan we never had in Pan and Skin. I have 2 books, and I want to get into them. So
okay.
You guys go with your thing, and then get back to me.
But before we move on, I have to say that the Blu-ray version of Die Hard is also valuable because that's the only one in which it's revealed at the end that John McClane is an android, which is a nice little twist.
That's right.
It was the unicorn one.
That we finds the unicorn, he picks it up, and
Yeah.
he was an
I knew
android
it.
all along.
Yeah.
That was in the 5th disc, the 5th variation.
Yeah.
The
Sean Young was the sled all along.
Spoiler warning. Come on.
we can edit that in post, right? Right?
Yeah, that's
okay,
right.
good.
Don't worry.
Spoiler beeps.
Yeah. No, I think the Die Hard is wonderful. The French name for Die Hard is Piège de Cristal, the Crystal Trap. And I think
That's a great title.
I think it's a wonderful title. And to me, there's something of Die Hard in that beautiful skyscraper crawling through the ducts and so on as he's taunted and so on. There's something to the Die Hard movie that will always be to me the Crystal Trap. I think it's one of those things where it's sort of like, we don't have this word in English, this beautiful word that only in another language. To me, it's Piège de Cristal, Die Hard. Derek, you mentioned 2 books.
Yes.
So lay them on us.
One was a recommendation to me. At this point in my life, when you're listening to this podcast, I'm single and I'm on the dating sites, which have extensive profiles from people all across the
Yes,
globe.
ladies, he is single.
There we go. This voice, caramel.
Edit that box.
We can edit this in post, right? So
caramel is just burnt sugar.
there we go. With
Prison
these
name.
profiles, these people tend to put, I'm this, and this is where I do, and this is what I like. Oh, by the way, here's my favorite items. And I look through all these profiles, and I see what these amazing people are recommending. One woman, somewhere on the earth, said, you have to read Bridge of Birds by Barry Hugart. You might want to type in Bridge of Birds and
I'm
find
gonna
out who
ask
the original
Siri that
author is.
right now.
There we go. And this profile stated explicitly, do not look into it, do not research, don't read the synopsis, just
Brendan,
go
stop!
in blind.
Oh no! 7 days later.
And over the
TV and get me.
By the way, the original Ring scared the
Ringu is
Ringu
good.
scared the
It's way scarier than Pingu, which I was surprised by.
Pingu has a scene where Pingu actually pees yellow plasticine on the Arctic plasticine. So I love Pingu for that. He saw Ringu, and that's the
That's
cause.
the body horror. No, both Ring and Ringu are amazing.
Amazing.
Go ahead.
Bridge of Birds is one of those rare novels, as I was alluding to earlier, with having a precedent that once you watch all of the copycat films and return back to the original film, you're like, oh, okay, I've seen this a million times. No, what you've seen is the copycat that was
Right.
so heavily influenced by this original. Bridge of Birds has no... there is nothing like it that I've read in the media. It is such an absolutely wonderfully woven, world-built tale of... It's set in almost a mythical Chinese world that very fantasy laden, that could almost be mistaken for Willow, Neverending Story, Labyrinth, all of these great films of just fantastical elements. This has in a Chinese setting in the past, and it is just
Confusions and Taoists, right?
Yeah, well, they take place. They those people make appearances distantly.
So it's like a cameo.
Kinda, yeah.
You asked me to pull this
yeah.
up, and I OK-go'd it, and it's by Barry Hugard, as you mentioned, and it's 1984. That's Bridge of Birds.
And if it ever gets made into a film, it'll blow people's minds. On that note, very briefly, not my recommendation, but the Philip Pullman Golden Compass, Subtle Knife, and Amber Spyglass trilogy is something materials. Wonderful series. Okay, so the other recommendation I would have is Callahan's Cross Time Saloon by Spider Robinson, which is a series of short stories, which I absolutely love. I love short stories. Stephen King had better short stories than his movies, his novels ever.
Stephen King was a great short story writer, it's true.
Fantastic. Same with Clive Barker. With Spider Robinson, he decided to create a bar of alcoholics because that's kind of where he was in his life, if I recall. And he decided, what if the bar of alcoholics was just inhabited by time travelers, aliens, people with psychokinetic powers, just people of all weird shapes and sizes, and it works. The science is hard, so it's not...
Science is as hard as the liquor.
Yeah.
Does he use that bar, that saloon, as a common location for his short stories?
That's actually where everything is set. In fact, most of the stories themselves, other than I think in the initial book, someone drives up to it. So they show the forest outside and the driveway leading into, and then from there on, every single story is set within the bar in the middle of the woods near New York. And it is just such a wonderfully funny, there's humor interjected. The drunks are interacting with these extra natural characters, and they have like the barroom piano and the limericks. It's a very exceptionally fun series. I have not read anything like it. So
there we have.
There you
So shaking out a couple recommendations. I think that the dark side, the mirror side to the recommendation, is the anti-recommendation. When somebody says, when you say to somebody, "Oh yes, I'm interested in this. I'm going to go see it, or I'm going to go read it, I'm going to go play it, I'm going to go experience it," and someone says, "You really shouldn't. Don't bother. It's bad. Oh, don't bother. It's bad." And I don't take those don't bothers. I'm bad with don't bother because I always, generally speaking, bother. So when someone says, "Oh, this is bad, don't bother," I say, "Well, but that means you get an opinion on it, and I don't get an opinion on it."
Sure.
There are certain cultural touchstones that, we're told don't bother all the time. So I don't think that we bothered with Twilight. I don't think that we bothered with 50 Shades of Grey. But really, those weren't for us. So
Right.
It's not,
You weren't going to bother anyway.
I wasn't reaching for Twilight. But I stopped and said, "Wait, is this bad and dumb?"
Right.
Sort of like we can snip these things out. It wasn't for me. It was for literally everybody else in the world. So, but there is something to that, and this thing comes up. When I mentioned earlier, Catcher in the Rye, you have a lot of people reading it, a lot of kids reading it and being like, "This is dumb and boring. I don't get it. I don't like Holden Caulfield. This was forced upon me." Maybe at one point it was thought to be canonical, but I don't get anything from it. It's certainly not my countercultural experience, and I don't want to read it. So some people say, "Oh, do we strike this from the list then? Do we remove this from a canon?" Is there a book or a movie or a video game or a band or something that that you in your infinite capacity could tell the world to don't bother, or something that you'd just be happy if people were just done with.
Oh,
It's easy to pick the low-hanging fruit and be like, I wish people would stop listening to the Justin Bieber on the radio.
I don't care.
And
about
I mean,
that.
and that's I think that's easy, and that's my pick, just to get rid of it. Get rid of the Justin Bieber. I mean, it's specious. What does that mean?
Right.
Maybe make more room for Fifi Dobson. So
I have an easy one. I have a low-hanging fruit.
all right, go for it.
Phantom Menace.
Oh,
The hype behind Star Wars was non-existent when the original one came out. In an era where there were no spoilers and no internet, it was all word of mouth and magazines. When sequels came out, the hype machine was in full bore. It became very toyable with Ewoks. Years and years and years passed. The script had diluted from its original intent of the original 9 films which were to be made. And when Phantom Menace was like, we're doing it, there were so many things wrong with Phantom Menace. I think the pod race was the only redeemable quality of that original of that film, and even that, I hated it. I think that the Phantom Menace, Star Wars Episode 1, followed by Star Wars Episodes 2 and 3, are just very horrible films that not even have held a redeeming factor of standing up to the test of time. With that said, I saw the recent recut of the first 3 films into Star Wars Turn to the Dark Side. Now
this is a fan recut, right?
It
This is
is.
somebody on the internet
Agreed.
who has taken the wherewithal and time to re-edit these movies into a more viewable version.
Yeah,
there's a couple of
restructured
these.
narrative. Yeah.
okay.
That's fascinating to me. And I think that we keep having to bookmark these. When you mentioned Peter Lorre, I thought to myself, we need to do one just on Peter Lorre.
Mhm.
How I just want to kiss him. And sorry, what?
Lay one right here. I don't even stick my tongue out.
Brian,
but then I will.
Brian's irresistible.
Yeah.
But mashups and edits and so on, cultural edits, I think is another one, and I think it's fascinating what
Yes.
people have done with these things. So are you saying then that it's not even worth our time to hate these movies, that we should just stop watching movies?
Yeah,
1, 2, 3,
I think
and just-
that erase it from the collective memory would be the best thing to absolve it.
And remember, I mean, that happens. I mean, and time washes away 99% of all
Agree.
art. And
But
so you can
that's
go back.
for a lot of the lesser populist stuff. The true classics, the ones that are cultural landscapes that shift the environment, those ones stay around regardless. And even if they're bad, in the case of the original Phantom Menace, it's going to be hard to scrub that out. Now, I find that they actually did a good job by getting out those video games. Republic Commando, fantastic first-person shooter. I recommend that.
Episode 1 Pod Racer.
Yeah.
Really good
it's
racing
pretty
game.
alright.
It's
Yeah.
a good game. I liked it.
The Clone Wars, which the cartoon series by Gennady Tartakovsky, fantastic stuff.
Was that some of the people who did Samurai Jack went on to do
Yeah.
one more citation
Yeah.
they did? Siri knows.
Dexter's Lab.
Dexter's Lab. There you go. All right.
Powerpuff Girls, and so I find that the restructured narrative of a fan edit has actually improved and made it possible to remember the first 3 films, albeit in a heavily edited format. Sometimes the fans, they know what they're doing and they do good things.
Sometimes the best things are done by people illegally for no money.
If they can dodge the cease and desist.
No, absolutely. I think it's fascinating what fan projects. The scope of them is just
Fantastic.
Before I banish a movie for all time, can I say what my fan edit for Star Wars would be?
Yeah.
And I've talked to some people about this before.
more Jar Jar, right? Jar Jar.
No,
and all
it's
that.
only one scene that I would recut. The rest is kind of its own
It's a
train
watch,
wreck. But
right.
the ending could have been saved, where he actually is transformed into the mechanical Darth Vader.
Okay.
Okay, so he's in the volcano. He's got all burnt, and they take him over to be repaired. And you see him all the robots are kind of poking him, and he's like, ah, and then you see the mask come down from his point of view. This big mask comes down, is on him. Then he slowly rises up, and the Emperor says, like, rise, Darth Vader. And then he says, like, where's Padme? And he's like, no, you killed her. And then famously he goes,
No!
And he's kind
He
of
rips-
Frankenstein's out
Yeah.
of the thing. And that's what everybody laughs at. And it's
Yes.
not serious at all. But that scene could have been recut to be better. And here's how. First of all, when I first saw that, and James Earl Jones's Darth Vader voice says, "Where's Padme?" It was really jarring because in the original trilogy, you never hear of her again.
Yeah.
If this is really the chronology, then
Darth Vader, the true Darth Vader, shouldn't give a shit.
right. So my re-edit would be that he's still on the table without the mask on.
And he says,
He's all burnt, and then the Emperor comes over and he's like, and Hayden Christensen says, "Where's Padme?" So his last whiny bit.
I killed so many children for
Yeah.
her. So many children I killed.
So anyway, he comes over and he says, "Where's Padme?" And he says, "Oh, you killed her." And then remember, there's a part where he uses the Force and the whole room starts to shake.
Yeah.
Well, that should happen then. He hasn't got the mask
Right.
on yet. Ah! And he's like,
Yells-
and as that's
he yells,
happening,
no, the mask is coming down.
and the mask is coming down. No! And the mask stifles the no. No!
The no
And then it comes up,
stops.
and he says, "Rise, Vader," and then he says, "Yes, my master."
Yes.
Never mentions her again. Boom! That's how you cut
The
that
transition
together.
from the man to the machine. It goes on his face. There's that moment of body horror where the
And
fact
he's trapped inside, and he loses all his emotion, and never talks about Padme
and the
again.
human stuff, where he's talking about and cares about his family, is gone ostensibly till they crack him open like a big
Exactly.
Fabergé egg at the end of Jedi.
Because what's the point if he puts the mask on and then immediately says, "Where's my girlfriend?" It's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, no. So anyway, I think just a little recutting of that last thing would have
Fair
made
enough.
and would have made the whole thing make more sense.
I would have done the whole thing where like he's there and he's like, "What?" He's yelling, "No!" And suddenly, the Doctor arrives, and I think it would be to me it would be David Tennant, and he'd be like, "Allons-y," and he. I'm sorry, I just think it would fix them both, both up.
Needs a little
Takes-
Stephen Moffat,
Takes him into the TARDIS, and
and he's like,
I
"Darth
said-
Vader, don't blink."
And he's like, "I saved everybody else. I can save you too."
I would-
essentially.
I would
That's
simply, the only edit I would make was I would add an extra jar.
Jar Jar Jar.
That's
yeah,
correct.
just
They
his
all have to say it
his
every time.
half brother is just named Jar.
Jar Jar Jr.
Yeah, Jar
Jar Jar Jar Jr.
Friends could call you.
All right,
Jar
so the movie that I would
banished from the island.
and there might be others, but I mentioned this one because this is an anti-recommendation that happened to me,
I got another.
and that movie is Conan the Destroyer.
Oh, okay.
I watched it fairly recently, just a couple years ago, because when I was a kid, I sort of missed a lot of those more violent movies in the 80s. My mom didn't let me watch, and so the more gory stuff.
Yeah.
So Conan was kind of not on my radar. So there was a couple of months where I was off work there a few years ago, and I decided to just watch all these movies I missed as a kid. So I watched all the Rambo movies. I watched, all these other things. So I decided I was going to watch the Conan movies, and a good friend of mine, John, you guys know, he's a huge fan of Conan, but in particular the books, and the original stories. But I watched Conan the Barbarian, and then I told him, and he said, "Don't watch Conan the Destroyer."
Right.
And I was like, "No, I've got it. I just downloaded it. I said, "Well, yeah, I'm just gonna."
Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, he was like,
You
"Don't."
ran out.
I was like, "No, I'm gonna watch it. I'm sure it can't be that bad." He's like, "No, it's really bad. It's gonna make you hate them both. It's a terrible movie. Just don't do it to yourself." And of course, like you, I was just like, "Don't tell me what to do. I'm gonna bother, and I'm gonna watch it." So I did go.
That is how I sound.
Yeah.
That
You're
is
like,
exactly-
don't give me. That's what you sound like.
You got it.
That's you. So anyway, I did go and watch
People
it.
listening will be like, "Wait, there's two Brendans now. What's happening?
Yeah.
I missed this twist." So you watched.
So
Conan the
I did
Destroyer.
watch Conan the Destroyer, and it was terrible to the point that I wished that I hadn't watched it. Because it was bad, it was a waste of time, and it did kind of make me hate the first one a little bit.
Yeah.
So that was actually a accurate anti-recommendation. So that's that. So if we just get rid of that one,
He was trying to keep you safe.
he was trying to help me.
Yeah.
He was just like, don't do it, but I did it anyway.
Mhm.
So in return, I will stricken Conan the Destroyer from the universe.
Well done. That's you done the public service.
Yes.
People stop watching.
Also Highlander 2, because ugh.
That's true.
Just fuck that movie.
Lady
The
Hawk.
whole idea.
Lady Hawk.
Yeah,
What's
because
Lady
of the
Hawk?
soundtrack. If you hit mute, it's a wonderful film.
Oh yeah.
Alan Parsons projects doing the music for it. Nothing says Fantasy World quite like 80s synthesizers.
You know, you say that, and yet we have two minds about whether Flash Gordon is the best or worst.
Now, Flash Gordon is fantastic. Recommend that highly.
He will save every one of us.
But it was futuristic, hence synthesizers.
Well, I'll give it that. All right, folks. Well, to the teeming masses who are still with us, I think we want to put a pin in this one. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been episode 2 of
Catlike Reflexes.
Is that our theme? Is that
our theme?
You
You want to do it again?
Let's
Yeah.
try
Ready?
it.
3, 2, 1. Catlike Reflexes.
That's good. I like that. It's melodic and it pops.
Yeah.
It really speaks to the experience.
Top 40.
All right, thanks to the internet, and drive safe. Those roads are terrible. All right, bye.
Don't tell them what to do.
Yeah, that's true.
And that let your mind